Hiya, Jacquie Edwards here again for Live at Lunchtime. It is Friday today, finally Friday, so I hope you're all looking forward to the weekend. I am actually in London this weekend, so if any of you are watching this live and are looking to find something to do on Saturday, I am going to be teaching my one-day rent-to-rent quick start course. So if you're interested in coming to that, check out the renttorentacademy.co.uk website. And yeah, go to the courses page, and there's also a special offer if you join now. So there's a last few places remaining because we had to book a bigger venue actually. So again, renttorentacademy.co.uk. If you are looking for something to do on Saturday in London, I have the one-day rent-to-rent training course coming up. So then on to what are we going to talk about today? We're going to continue talking about outsourcing. So for those of you that joined in yesterday, we started a quick overview about outsourcing because I got loads and loads of questions on outsourcing. So today we're going to talk specific to my rent-to-rent business and how I have basically outsourced some of my business. So my kind of outsourcing journey actually started I don't know, a bajillion years ago. And it was basically inspired when I read the book, The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. It's quite an old book now, but that was one of probably the first books that I read that kind of made me realize that you don't have to have that 9-to-5 job. There are a million other opportunities out there and you can do something different. So at the time I was living in London and I was actually living in a flat that I rented. So this was what, maybe 6-7 years ago. My friend and I had rented a 3-bedroom flat with the idea that if we wanted to, we could rent out the 3rd bedroom anytime. Now, this is kind of not something you're supposed to do. Now that I know about property, I've learned that's called subletting and you're not supposed to do it. But at the time, we had no idea. So we used to rent out the 3rd bedroom. Then my friend moved out and I would rent out both of the bedrooms. So the contract for the flat was completely in my name, just a normal AST, and I would rent out both of the bedrooms. Again, probably wasn't, actually, I know it wasn't probably not the way I was supposed to do it. It was definitely not the way you're supposed to do things, but you don't know what you don't know. So this is when I was still working as an accountant based in London. So yeah, I used to rent out the rooms in my flat. And after reading the 4-Hour Workweek, I read all about virtual assistants and how you can, have other people help you do the stuff that you don't want to do. So basically how you can delegate all those kind of small admin-y type tasks or bigger tasks as well, but how you can just start outsourcing the things to free up your time, because really time is your most important asset. So I actually had somebody manage all my spare room ads. So, I found a VA from Elance, I think, and they were in charge of responding to all my spare room messages, setting up viewings for me. So they had access to my calendar. They would set up the viewings and message everybody. They would do a little screening process ahead of time as well before setting up the viewing, because I was living in the property, I had some quite strict criteria on who I wanted to be living with me. So that worked out really well, and that was my kind of first foray into outsourcing. And basically in that project I had a really kind of small set criteria. It was a short-term project. I had some really key steps to go through that I had just documented out to somebody. So, there was a specific set of questions, a specific way to get into my diary and book the viewings, and specific times to do that. So it was quite a simple project, and really what made it really successful, the outsourcing part, was being really clear in what I was looking for somebody to do. So I used a couple of VAs since then in some of my accounting work and going forward, but not really a lot until now. So we won't go into virtual assistants now, but I also started outsourcing local people here in the UK. So I started doing that once I got my rent-to-rent business up and running a little bit. So the very first person that we took on, and this is what I'll kind of focus today's session on, and then we'll cover, I guess, next week on Monday how I went forward from there. So the very first person that we took on is somebody who I called my letting manager. So when we got started in the rent-to-rent business, it was pretty much me doing everything. I've got my partner Anthony who helps in the business, but he's got his own business, so that's where he spends all of his time. So the property business, he really was more of the financial partner, not the doing anything partner. he does do stuff. I shouldn't say that, he'll get upset. But so he's more of kind of the sounding board. We have our board meetings, we have our meetings together of kind of strategy and planning and oversight. But when it comes to the day-to-day running of the business, that's what I do. So we started the rent-to-rent business with me doing everything. So I was out sourcing properties, talking to landlords, talking to agents. Then we got a couple of properties. So basically, the first properties we took 2 on in the same month. They went live on the same month. And then we had 1 more the month after that. And then I had like 2 more lined up for the month after that and 1 after that. So it was basically they were kind of bang, 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 all in a row. Everything started happening at once. So I was quite overwhelmed, and I still needed to, because even though once you start signing contracts, then it all starts happening, because you sign a contract for a rent-to-rent, you might need to do a little bit of refurb, you need to kind of manage getting it all set up if it needs furniture, anything that needs to happen. Then you need to be doing tenant viewings, so if you've got like 5 bedrooms, it might take 5 viewings to get one person to go into the room, so you're doing kind of 15, maybe 20, 25 viewings to get people into the room. And then you also need to be continually filling your pipeline as well of properties and landlords and agents that you can take over in the future. So once we got to about 3 properties that we had up and running, I was really struggling to keep up with everything, from doing viewings with tenants to doing viewings with landlords to managing kind of the refurb and the maintenance on all the houses. So that's where I decided, what was the main thing that was taking up a lot of my time that wasn't something I really wanted to keep doing, and it was the tenant viewings. So tenant viewings can take up loads of time, traveling back and forth, getting them scheduled into when it works in their schedule to do stuff. So that was the first thing I outsourced, and I found a really lovely lady who was looking for more experience in property. She was interested in kind of having her own letting business. I actually met her at my local PIN meeting, Property Investors Network meeting. We met there. We became friends on Facebook. I actually just put a post on Facebook saying, hey, anybody in Oxford, I'm looking for some help. And she said she would be more than happy to help. So we sat down, had a couple of chats, and it just went from there. So I kind of explained to her, here's what to do. We did, which is the most important part. So it's really kind of setting the standards, setting the plan. So coming up with, what success looks like. So, maybe success looks like we've only got a week void, or maybe success looks like we don't have any voids. And what does failure look like? So maybe failure looks like we've got, a void room for a month or something like that. So it's setting that really specific criteria to work towards. Then we kind of got together, we went to view all of our properties that we had at the time. So I showed her around each of the properties, into all the rooms. I talked her through what I did on my viewings. Now, I'm not an expert at doing viewings, but we had to start somewhere, so I said, this is how I do things. Again, we had our master key system, so I showed her how that worked, gave her a copy of the key so she could get into the properties. Some of them by then had people living in them, so I told her, we don't want to be doing viewings after X time at night because we don't want to be bothering tenants and stuff. So I kind of gave her the system and the process that we were using, or that I was using to do all my tenant viewings. And then I basically passed it over to her, along with the spare room messages and spare room responses. So that's where we advertise for all of our tenants. So I gave her the details to log into spare room, and kind of told her how often I wanted to be checking messages, how quickly I wanted to be responding to people. So, we've got kind of set criteria of when a message comes in, ideally we want to be responding to people within 2 hours, because if you're not responding quickly, people kind of lose interest. They find something else from somebody else who's responded more quickly, and they book themselves up with other viewings. So we want to be responding to people kind of during the day within 2 hours, not overnight, of course. But yeah, so I kind of went through and what we were looking to kind of ask people to pre-screen and that type of thing. So basically walking her step by step through the process. Now, because this was quite early on in our business, we didn't have anything written down, so we didn't have any set procedures written down, which is what we're really working on now, because that makes it even easier to get into the flow. But because this was the first person we took on, we did write a couple of procedures down afterwards, but at the time it was basically more important to just go step by step with her through everything that we wanted to get done. And all she was responsible for was, answering spare room messages, setting up viewings, and doing the viewings. Then once a tenant took the room, then I would take over and I would take care of all the referencing then. So she had a very set role. She had kind of a set pay. We set kind of, here's what good looks like, here's what bad looks like, kind of what her goals and kind of goals were, and we went from there. So that worked out really, really well. and it took a load of pressure off of me. So now I no longer had to worry about doing tenant viewings, making sure I had time open in my schedule to do all of these viewings, and I was able to continue focusing on sourcing new properties to grow the business, and I was able to focus on kind of doing the management of the refurbs to make sure everything was up to my standard and that we were getting everything sorted, because at that time my kind of building handyman team hadn't been with us for very long, so we were still kind of getting our process sorted for that. I was still figuring out how to do any of it because I'd never done it before as well. So it gave me, by having her do something, which, you know, tenant viewings is still a very, very high value task, because if you don't have tenants, you know, you don't have any income coming in. But it was a kind of an easy task to segregate out of the kind of the whole flow of the business and pass over to one person, with me still monitoring what she was doing, how the results were coming in, but to be able to hand that over to her to free up my time to do other more important tasks, and tasks that I was more suited for, basically. So that was the very first person we took on. So if that's where you're kind of at in your rent-to-rent business, you should start thinking about, you know, how are you going to free up some of your time. You aren't, you know, you didn't just get into rent-to-rent to get another job. Nobody really likes a job. So start figuring out, you know, how can you add other people in? What would start making that easy? Where can you find that person? And kind of set up a plan and go from there. So I hope you enjoyed that. I am going to go off and have a bit of lunch now before I pack up and head to London this afternoon. But we'll be back on Monday for another session of Live at Lunchtime. Again, we'll talk about outsourcing and go into some more details. And also remember, if you're not doing anything tomorrow and you're in London, come and join me at the one-day rent-to-rent quick start course, and you can find more details on my website, renttorentacademy.co.uk. Thank you, and have a wonderful weekend.